Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into a real head-scratcher, how China's electric vehicle market just exploded out of nowhere, right when everyone thought it was hitting the brakes. It's a fascinating story about timing, a whole new generation of drivers, and what happens when a car stops being just a car. When China's EV sales went through the roof in late 2020, the local media kept using this one specific phrase to talk about it, 突如として. It basically means suddenly or completely out of the blue. And that's exactly what it felt like. It was a total shock to the system and created a genuine mystery. And yeah, it really was a puzzle. Just months before this, the whole outlook for electric vehicles was looking pretty grim. A lot of people were predicting a major slowdown. The government's own goals seemed almost impossible to reach. So you have to ask, what on earth happened? To really get how bizarre this boom was, we have to set the scene. Let's take a look at what was happening right before everything took off, because the context here makes the explosion even more wild. Okay, so first thing to know, the wider car market in China, it was actually shrinking. Total car sales had been dropping for 3 years straight after hitting their peak back in 2017. Cities were getting totally gridlocked, finding a parking spot was a nightmare. It really seemed like the golden age of the car was kind of hitting a wall. But while all that was happening, this happened. In the second half of 2020, sales of new energy vehicles, and that includes EVs, they didn't just grow. They skyrocketed, hitting a record 1.367 million for the year. It was this huge contradiction, right? The overall car market is down, but suddenly the EV market is absolutely on fire. And get this wasn't just about some cheap little city car becoming a hit. Those were popular, sure. But the real story was that the expensive, super high-tech models from premium brands like Tesla, BYD, and NIO, they were just flying out of the showrooms. So what was the first big clue to solving this whole mystery? Well, the first major piece of the puzzle was a global event that, let's be honest, changed daily life for pretty much everyone. And it created this environment that, totally unexpectedly, turned out to be perfect for electric vehicles. So the pandemic introduced this concept that became a real buzzword in China, internal circulation. Now, it originally meant focusing on the domestic economy, but it also started to describe a new way of life, one that was all about shorter, local trips, staying within your own city or province instead of traveling long distance. And this new lifestyle? It was like it was custom built for EVs. People wanted the safety of their own car instead of, crowded buses or subways. And crucially, since all the trips were now shorter and local, the biggest fear about EVs, that whole range anxiety thing on a long road trip, it just kind of faded away. A day trip was now easily doable on a single charge. So for this new reality, the EV wasn't just a cool choice, it was the practical one. But a change in how people traveled was only one part of it. There was something much deeper going on under the surface. A really fundamental, generational shift in how people even thought about what a car is. Right, let's talk about China's Gen Z. We're talking about people born after 1995. This is a generation that spends, on average, over 7 hours a day on their phones. So for them, driving a traditional car was seen as a chore, right? A boring chunk of time where they had to be disconnected. They just weren't interested. That is, until the cars themselves began to change. And then this incredible survey came out that revealed just how different their thinking is. When they were asked what a car represents to them, Gen Z's top answer, by a long shot, was a technology device. They don't see a vehicle. They see a gadget, just like their phone. This quote just nails it. It perfectly captures that shift in mindset. For this whole new wave of buyers, they're not even looking for a traditional car anymore. They want a device on wheels, a smart, moving space that's connected to their lives. So this huge change in mindset, it was the exact opening the smart EV makers had been waiting for. And they didn't just notice it. They built their entire strategy around it, redesigning not just the car, but the whole experience of buying one. The very idea of what luxury means completely changed. It wasn't about physical stuff anymore, like fancy leather seats or wood trim. The new luxury was digital. It was about having advanced autopilot, getting seamless software updates over the air, and having killer in-car connectivity. Function totally beat form. And the automakers, they just leaned into this hard. They started packing their cars with features that felt instantly familiar to a generation raised on apps. Slick autopilot systems, smart driver profiles that remember all your settings, and a whole suite of apps for music and video, all updated constantly, just like your phone. And it wasn't just the cars that changed. The way you buy them was completely redesigned. You can forget about high-pressure salespeople. The new way starts with an app, where you can check everything out on your own time. And when you do go to a store, it's for a long, multi-hour test drive, so you can really play with all the tech. The staff are there to be helpful guides, not pushy sellers. It's a total game changer. Okay, so with the mystery of the 2020 boom pretty much solved, a perfect storm of new habits and a new tech-first generation, a new and maybe even bigger challenge has popped up for China's EV market. Here's the problem. The market's growth is split. You've got sales booming at the really low end with these super basic walking substitute cars, and then you have sales booming at the super high end with the premium tech-heavy cars for early adopters. But that huge, conservative, practical mass market in the middle, they haven't really been won over yet. And this is a massive problem because the Chinese government has set this incredibly ambitious goal. By the year 2025, they want 20%, 1/5, of all new cars sold in the country to be new energy vehicles. So here's the reality check. At the time of this big boom, the market share for these vehicles was just 5.4%. That means there is a massive, and I mean massive, gap to close in just a couple of years. Which, of course, leaves us with the next big question, and it's one that's going to define the future of the entire EV industry. Can this whole running smartphone idea, the tech-first approach that so brilliantly captured Gen Z, can it also convince the average everyday car buyer to finally make the switch? That right there is the billion-dollar challenge ahead.